middle-aged, especially Caucasian men, when they get to sort of 40, they're like a leopard and they're not going to change their spots. And if they're behaving badly now, you have to put an enormous amount of effort in to get them to recognize that their behavior is wrong, to get them to choose to go on a journey to change that bad behavior, and to stay on the journey. And in my experience, it doesn't work.
Hey guys, it's Matt Haycox here for another one of our Corona lockdown podcasts. Anyone who's been following these over the last few days will have seen that I've been hiding under my hat, but I've been brave. I've taken the hat off. I still haven't shaved my head. I've got a very dodgy haircut for us today, but hopefully that is going to pale into insignificance when we talk to Peter Ryding, who I've got with me today. Peter Ryding, former Chief Technology Officer who became a turnaround CEO, saving many businesses and winning multiple national awards along the way. And he now serves as a coach to senior executives, as well as being the founder of an AI-based coaching platform, which is called Vic Your Coach. Peter's a super experienced coach. He's got many stories to tell, lots of advice to give. So it's a pleasure to have you here, Peter. If I got anything wrong in that bio, now's your chance to put it right and tell us what we know about you.
It doesn't normally sound that good, Matt. So thank you very much. I'll take what you said.
I didn't even rehearse it. You see, it's so naturally good that it just rolls off the tongue.
Excellent.
But in all seriousness, I mean, like, give us a bit about your background. I mean, obviously, I guess we're here today more to talk about coaching, but but going back into your story about your life as a turnaround executive and some of the businesses you've saved. I'm sure you've got plenty of stories to tell and tips we can learn.
Yes, well, in terms of, I've got a somewhat unusual background. I'm a chartered chemical engineer, so I get processes, numbers, and I'm inquisitive in terms of what are the things you have to measure to get the results that you want. So I'm a massive fan of key performance indicators. That's one part of me, and my career started in Exxon. At the time, it was the biggest company in the world, oil industry, so it was naturally for me. And the industry is all about numbers. I then moved to Mars, the chocolate company, and there it's about speed.
Not the planet. I thought that's
well, interesting. The alumni group are called the Old Martians. And, what's amazing is that probably half of the executives that leave Mars are fired because they have an up or out policy. It's a conscious policy driven by the founders. And I was very lucky. I met, at the time, he was the third richest man in the world, Forrest Mars, and he was the son of the original Mars who started the business. Okay. And he had a shit upbringing. He had to literally kneel down and pray for the Mars brands. That's what his father said. His father said to him, if you want to take over this company, you've got to show commitment. Get on your knees and pray. Crazy stuff. But, Mars is a very tough environment, and I learned a lot from Mars as well. It's packed out with good people. And if there's one thing that I learned from Mars is that if you constantly recruit people better than you are, everything moves forward. The only problem is in Mars, I think, in my view, they took it a bit too far. They adopted Jack Welch's attitude of weeding the garden. So every year, 10% of people go. Mm-hmm. And if you're on the bottom 10%, you go. It's simple. Everyone knows the rules. But what it means is everyone is there trying to be noticed and to deliver change. And in a way, there are too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And something I learned there is it's great to be employing the very best people you can get. You end up with a very stimulating environment. However, you also need in any company, you need some plodders, some people who enjoy doing the process, not innovating it, not trying to be an artisan, but people who follow instructions. Because I think to be efficient, you need to have a process which people follow. And as an engineer, I'm totally bought into that. However, because we live in this VUCA world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity, this VUCA world means we're constantly changing. So you can't have a whole company stuck in the mud. You need innovation, and getting that balance, I think, is really, really tough. And I think in some ways, Corona is just another example of the VUCA world. And I know some of the companies I'm working with at the moment, they're actually seeing COVID-19 as a dress rehearsal, because what they say is SARS was highly infectious but not that deadly. Was not particularly infectious, but it was deadly. COVID-19 is infectious but not especially deadly. What if the next time, and there probably will be another time, what if that is infectious and it's deadly? And what many companies I'm working with now are doing is they're trying to say, what can we do to build into our company this organizational flexibility to suddenly switch to home working, if that's what's required, or maybe to do some other change which the next crisis will force on us. And I think this idea of accepting there will never be a time where we can sit back and take a breath and review what's happened in a nice, calm environment, and then come up with a plan for the future. We've got to accept the VUCA world is a reality. And having some people who simply deliver and get rewarded for it, and who go home on a Friday thinking, I've done a good job because my manager has said to me, thank you and well done, you've made a contribution. Whilst at the same time having enough change makers, innovators, people who challenge, maybe even a few young Turks who are difficult to deal with, but getting that balance right. And I think as a leader, as a CEO, it's really tough to make sure that you are bringing both of those sorts of people into your business, and you give them both a career track, which is good for them.
Sorry, I'm going on a bit here. Out of interest, probably more a personal question than anything else, because I've read a bit of Jack Welch's his work. I mean, he was actually. I mean, I guess if we go back probably 30 years, he was my dad's idol CEO. My dad was in business at IT. And he always used to, the two people he used to rave about back then, although I guess we were in a world where there was less famous business people, was Tom Peters and Jack Welch. But I've read some of Jack's stuff, and even quite recently as well. I was always interested in that that firing of the bottom 10%. And I guess my question is it just it's a black and white thing that even if you've got let's say 100 people who are all amazing, but the bottom 10% are obviously slightly less amazing than the others, they still get fired, do they? Even if everybody's
very good question. I suspect that has never really been put to the test. Because when you have a large organization of thousands of employees, you're never going to get that. I do think that Mars and some other organization I've worked with are top heavy with good people, but there are always people who are underperforming at the bottom. But the way Mars did it, or I probably still do it, they call it saw thumbing, simply saying you draw a distribution curve and you expect most people to be pretty much in the middle. There will be bottom performers. And if you're a manager of 10 people, you are told that you have to have at least one bottom performer, at least one top performer. You have to do that. And you then have to justify where the other people sit. But because you've got thousands of people, I think just statistically, you will get some underperformers. And I think maybe a better answer to your question, Matt, might be the philosophy says we need to keep new blood coming in. To make room for new blood, you have to get people out. And the best way of doing it is just getting the bottom 10% out. Sure. And Jack Welch and Forrest Mars says, you weed the garden. By observation, Mars is a very, very successful and profitable company. At some level, it does work. I must say I was very lucky. I met Jack Welch many years ago at a dinner. I'd won an award, and part of the award was dinner. I think there must have been about 25 of us, but he was the main guest. I must say, he didn't come across as a very nice person at all.
I was about to say my impression. I mean, I've listened. He got a podcast. He was one of the early business podcasts as well, wasn't he? But he just comes across as a absolutely hard as nails animal that is on duty with that, probably eradicating the bottom 10% in every aspect of his life, 24 hours a day.
Yes, although again, to be fair, but maybe playing devil's advocate, at this dinner, everyone listened to every single word he said. And one of the things that really struck me, which I've used in my turnaround career, and also not just from near bankruptcy to okay, but from good to great as well, is his approach to dealing with people who didn't fit culturally in an organization. I'm not sure you're aware of it, but imagine a 2x2 matrix where you've got performance up the side, low to high, and cultural fit along the bottom, low to high. And what he said is some things are obvious. If you've got someone who is in the high performing, high cultural fit, you promote them. If you've got someone in low cultural fit and low performance, you fire them. And what he then said is the thing that differentiated GE and any consistently successful company is what you do with the people in the other two quarters. And what he said is where you have someone who's a low performer, but is a really good cultural fit, they're probably popular, they have a positive mindset, they help lubricate it. When there's conflict, they're there and they just help things happen. What you do is you love them to bits, you coach them, you mentor them, you give them extra training, and you do everything you can to push them up, at least into the grey area between high performance and low performance. And if you get them there, brilliant. Now, if you don't get them there, you still got to get rid of them, because no company can afford to have passengers nowadays. However, what he said is the critical thing is what do you do with people in the top left corner? That is high performing who don't fit culturally. I don't know if you've heard what have you any idea about what it is that Jack Welch said?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know what Jack says on it, but it's something I've thought about and talked about a lot. Even to me, it's not a lot going back in time, but only over the last 3 to 6 months, because I guess a more maybe a more known to today's audience person who talks about it is Gary V.
Right. Yeah.
You're familiar with Gary, and Gary talks about it, and it really hit home on some of the people I've had in my organisations over the years, who I've in hindsight looked back and thought I should have fired them a long time ago. Exactly. because the extreme example, if you like, it's obviously not true, but let's say the hypothetical extreme example is a salesperson who sells like buggery. He's doing an amazing job selling everything, but he walks into the office and punches everyone in the face. At what point do you say, well, it's just not acceptable, no matter how much you're selling, it's not acceptable for you to be punching people in the face? And obviously that's it's an example for effect, but I've had people in my organization who have been very, very good, too good at the jobs that they do, but culturally they've been unpopular because they're difficult people, and they've created like them and us. They've really created voids and made bad blood with made bad blood situations. But I've always, I guess I'm ashamed now to look back and say, but I've always protected them and justified them because they were such great performers. And it was really listening to some of Gary Vee stuff over the last 3 to 6 months, where he was banging on about the fact that if somebody is not right for the culture, it doesn't matter how good they are, they must go. And when I really started to analyse it and think, what, you're completely right. I mean, Gary goes one step further to say that he hates it when people leave when he should have fired them, because it makes it feel like they've had the last laugh and not him. I mean, I don't think my ego is quite that bad.
No, let's hope not.
And I'm pleased to say that a lot of people, so all the people who've been an issue have actually left on their own accord or through other reasons. So those issues don't occur anymore. But I now know 100% I would not allow it to happen again. And as long as we've learned that lesson, I guess it doesn't matter how long it took me to learn it. But now it's something that I'm a complete advocate of. But I'll be interested to. So I've taken you away from what you were saying about Jack.
Cool.
I'm assuming Jack's answer is somewhat similar.
Fire the bastard. Simple.
Yeah.
No question. No hanging about. If someone doesn't fit culturally, the mixed messages that it can give by tolerating that behavior. Often if you get graduates or someone else joins the company, they tend to look up and they don't listen so much to what people say, but they watch what people do. and they say that's the behavior that'll get me to the top. And if that behavior is bad behavior, you're encouraging everyone who comes into the business to act badly. And certainly I've been trained in psychology and coaching for over 20 years now. And what I've learned is that middle-aged, especially Caucasian men, when they get to sort of 40, they're like a leopard, and they're not going to change their spots. And if they're behaving badly now, you have to put an enormous amount of effort in to get them to recognize that their behavior is wrong, to get them to choose to go on a journey to change that bad behavior, and to stay on the journey. And in my experience, it doesn't work. As you mentioned, Matt, I've taken over 14 companies on the edge of bankruptcy. I'm pleased to say I've saved all of them. I have never said, I wish I'd given that person more time. The only things I've said, matching what your experience, Matt, is my gut feel told me they were the wrong person. I should have fired them sooner. And just picking up the sales director example, I would say out of all the directors I've fired, well, I fired more CEOs than any other title, but in terms of direct reports of CEOs, sales directors are the ones I've fired most of, because often they bullshit. They talk about the jolly hockey stick sales coming in the future. They say they're often quite charismatic. They say they've got all these wonderful relationships. And when you go around and ask the people in the sales team, what do you think of your boss? They all say, oh, he's a great guy, he's charismatic. When you then discover the truth and you fire the bastard because they don't fit culturally, all the worms come out of the wormholes, and they say, he was a bastard. We've lost 4 of our top salesmen in the last 3 years. He always took the credit for anything that was good. He passed the blame on. All this promised pipeline of the future is a fantasy. It's not going to happen. And you actually discover that some of the ex-customers didn't leave because of price or service. They lost because they found your previous sales director an obnoxious bastard. 100%. And when you look at that, Harvard Business Review did research about, I think it was about 2 years ago, and they said a bad recruit can often cost 10 times the annual remuneration. So, if you've got a sales director with an annual remuneration with a good commission of, say, £500,000, recruiting the wrong one can cost you £5 million because of the bad reputation it gives you, the harm to the pipeline, the demoralization of the sales team. And of course, sales teams need to work with the manufacturing and all of those, and the operations. All of those should be working together collaboratively. And if you've got a bad egg, it just messes everything up. And that's why I think the phrase, instead of hiring on skills and firing on lack of culture, you hire on culture, and then you afterwards you make sure you get enough skills in place. And I think nowadays the battle for talent is so hot, there isn't enough talent out there. You can no longer afford to hire quickly, fire them if they've gone wrong, and hire another one. For a start, it costs you 10 times the annual remuneration if you make a bad hire. By the time you get the lost productivity, the hiring costs, and the impact on the company, there just isn't enough talent. So you've got to take more care hiring. And also, especially in the Corona world, you've got to be ever so careful about looking after your talent. You've got to be compassionate. You've got to show empathy. Forgive me, I'm sure you and your listeners know what empathy is, but just in case they don't, what Gandhi said was, standing in someone else's shoes isn't enough. You've got to walk a mile in their shoes to feel what they feel. And so what empathy is, it's not understanding how someone else feels intellectually, it's feeling what they're feeling. So at the moment, I'm helping a number of companies get through this Corona crisis. And what I do is, just before they're about to make a decision on furloughing or redundancies or any big decision with staff, I ask them 2 questions. First of all, if you had a relative in your workforce right now who was financially vulnerable, was concerned about their health, had a complex family situation, and this would just be the last straw, would you still make this decision? So that's designed to make them more empathetic instead of just understanding an intellectual level. And the other critical question is that we're going to come through this corona. I know Goldman Sachs says it's going to kill more companies than people, and it probably will, but most companies will come through this. And if you what I do is I get the board to think through, project yourself to the end of the year. People are reflecting on 2020, how their company and their leadership team and their CEO has acted. How have they communicated their actions? Do they feel that they've been looked after and cared for? Because if when they do that review at the end of the year, as many of us do coming up January the 1st, if the answer is no, they will probably be looking for a job elsewhere. And not only might they go, but they will then probably contact their colleagues, their ex-colleagues, and say, we weren't looked after during 2020. This company did really well. Why didn't you come to us? So it'll be more of a talent drain. And the upside is, if you really show care and compassion and empathy now, at the end of the year, they will be saying to all their friends, well, you might have been let down by your company and your bosses. My company was exemplary. It had really tough decisions to make. It was open with us. It treated us like adults. They didn't sugarcoat anything, but they did it in a way that says, this is where I want to stay. So instead of moving on, they'll stay, and they will then get their contacts in other companies to come and join them. So I think it's critical right now that any leader really thinks through, what are their employees going to be saying in 9 months' time about how have they acted? And, that goes back to Gandhi walking a mile in their shoes, feeling the pain, and then acting accordingly. A, you'll make much better decisions as a leader, and B, you will build trust instead of burning trust. There are a lot of companies right now that are burning trust. They're pissing their employees off. There are other companies that are doing the right thing. And I think in terms of leadership, one of the big differences between leaders and managers, in my experience, is that leaders focus on doing the right thing, whereas managers typically focus on doing the thing right. Mm-hmm. And doing the right thing has got two elements. One is strategically, are you focusing on the 20% of things that make 80% of the difference? And the other thing is morally, at a value level, at a purposefulness level, are you doing something that you are proud of and that fits your values? And does it fit the values of the company and your employees? Because one of the biggest sources of cognitive dissonance and stress is where you do something which is incompatible with your values. So if you believe in honesty and you lie, you'll feel guilt. And whilst guilt, worry, and stress are different, and you have to address them in different ways, but they're sort of all part of a negative psychological bubble. And so right now, as a leader, I believe every leader needs to work out what are the 20% of things that make all the difference going forward. And that's probably different to the 20% of things that got you where you are. So you've got to be prepared to change this corporate agility thing again. But also, can you stand up and be proud? And in 9 months' time, will you be proud to say, well, it was a bit shitty, but you know what? I did the right thing. And if you can answer yes to both of those, your company will be ahead of most of your competitors, in my view.
No, I think that's very true, very, very valuable information for everybody watching or listening right now, and not just in these particular times as well. I think ultimately doing the right thing is a timeless concept that can never really hurt any leader.
If more people did it.
Yes, but listen. I want to move on to talk about some turnaround situations and the concept of turnaround, because as well it ties in with a couple of things. Obviously, one thing you've just said is that Goldman Sachs say that Corona is going to kill more businesses than it does people, and one of the things I'm talking about and still talking about, because I know we're 35 days into this, which is theoretically different to 30 days ago when we were only 5 days into it, but I am still of the mind that 90%, if not more, of the businesses that have gone bust or are going to go bust or are struggling right now are the businesses that needed to go bust, that that have had the wrong fundamentals, that have been unviable. And I talk quite a lot about the fact that, to me, UK SME, and to be clear, when I talk about businesses, I'm normally talking about, the SME space. But that they have been, a large proportion have been verging on bankruptcy for the last 6, 12, 18, 48 months. And, we look at, many lending propositions on a daily basis. I mean, my day job is a lender, both secured and unsecured, to UK SMEs, and the bank statements, the accounts, etc., that we see, shows a large portion of these businesses in a position of having no cash on the balance sheet, not struggling to make payroll at the end of the month, not making any money, or making a very little amount of money, to be no justification to return on capital or to be a return on time. And they've only survived, these businesses, because there's been an availability of alternative lenders to kick them past the end of the month, to help them pay the wages, to continue to promote that delusion that they do have a viable business. And what I've been saying, certainly at the beginning of this, when we're a week or two into Corona, and I don't particularly feel like we're deep enough in for me to change my view yet, is that the businesses that have been really failing are the ones are the ones that have never had the sound fundamentals. Not the businesses that Corona has affected, but businesses that were always going to be affected by any interruption to their cash flow for more than 3 or 5 days. And obviously Corona has been that interruption. But anybody who any loss of a customer, any prolonged missing of a key employee would have been enough to send any of these businesses over the edge, because fundamentally too many businesses are running an unviable model, not making any money, and never going to be able to make any money. So I mean, I'd be interested in your view on my comment there, and then also let's take that back to the 14 businesses that you've gone in to turn around, and I'd be interested to know how many you didn't take on as turnarounds because they were just fundamentally unable to ever be turned around.
Sure. I think at a high level, I agree with what you say. I think there are some subtleties there. When I was a venture capitalist with 3i, one of the things drummed into us was, in 95% of instances of corporate failure, or even being in a turnaround situation, the question the investor has to ask is it the market or is it the management? And when it's the management, it's actually quite easy. You change the management. Yep. One way or another, you change the management. So as a turnaround CEO, I would often go in and replace the CEO. I'd have to have a very quick assessment of the other board directors. I would change some of them. In one case, I fired the lot. But in most cases, there were 1 or 2 good people there, often held down by an arrogant, male, Caucasian, middle-aged, command and control CEO who was just a dinosaur and had to go. But there was some good talent there. So if the answer is the market, that's where it's a tougher call, I think, because you might get new competitors coming in. It might be that the management team has been slow to respond, but there is still a response. It might be that they're old and they're outdated, like Woolworths or Blockbusters. Sometimes there is such a mega shift, it isn't worth taking the risk to try and reinvent yourself. On the other hand, I'm sure you know the story about Nokia was originally a timber company making telegraph poles, and that's actually how they got into the telecoms industry.
I didn't know that, actually.
There are wonderful stories of companies innovating. The question is that innovation worth the risk? Going back to your point, though, about should most of these companies, do the companies deserve a loan, not from the government? Let's forget the fact that government is giving anyone money. We, the public, are giving them the money. The government is just the conduit. Do we want the taxes that we've paid to be poured into lots of small, inefficient companies that aren't going anywhere? Now, the answer is no, of course. It can be quite difficult with a crude tool that the government has to identify those. But you are right, no question, Matt. I've seen a lot of companies that don't deserve to be there. And one benefit of a recession is that it clears out the bottom performers. It forces whole swathes of the workforce to reskill. And that's good for the country, because if you've got old sectors which are dying and are only existing because the banks are too scared to be seen as pulling more overdrafts, and that the reality is the only reason we're in a benign, or we have been in a benign debt situation, is because the banks got such a bad name during the 2008, 2009 crisis. They were scared to be pulling the plugs when normally they would have done. And they don't want to waste money by putting turnaround guys like me in. And what they do is they just let these companies bumble along to avoid the bad publicity. What they should have done is they should be pulling those and getting the workforce to be redeployed and reskilled. That's what's right for the country. So I do agree. There are lots of companies that have been just bumbling along. In the turnaround world, we call them zombies. They're never going to go anywhere. They're just the living dead, and it's better just to get a wooden stake, however you kill a zombie, I don't know, shove it in their heart, and that's the end of the company. You know, that's what should happen. And Corona, in that sense, will do that. I think the sad side about Corona is that through no fault of some good management teams, without more government help, good companies will die. And that's a real shame. On the other hand, you know, it's Darwinian, isn't it? You know, if you're good at making profit and cash, and you're good at managing people, you will probably survive and thrive anything. I was in San Diego. I was invited to the mayor of San Diego's annual dinner, and I was sitting opposite the CEO of a real estate company, and I was sitting next to the CEO of another real estate company. And this was during a big recession. And the guy next to me said, basically, life shit. There's no properties moving. He's had to get rid of a lot of his people. He doesn't see a way forward. He's got too many overheads, doom and gloom. And he said to the other CEO, who was a female, what do you think about all this recession? Fascinating answer. She sort of looked at him for a bit and said, you know, I simply don't understand what you're saying. What I find is that in any economic situation, if you put your staff first and you encourage them to put your customers first, and you go out of your way to deliver outstanding customer service, you will find that your customers are delighted. They tell their contacts, and their contacts become your customers, and your business grows. That's what I'm finding right now. And that refusal to live and to dwell in the negativity of recession, doom and gloom, isn't it bad? Really, you know, and that company, the guy next to me did go under, but, you know, he was the wrong leader, certainly the wrong leader at that time. Whereas the other leader, you know, she was inspiring, she was positive. And I think one of the things she did superbly in her company, which I discovered afterwards, was that she was always encouraging all her management to say thank you in a particular way. I don't even know about what research says is that if you ask employees, how often does your manager thank you when you deserve it? The answer is about 10% of the time. That's what employees say. When you ask managers, what proportion of the time do you thank your employees when they deserve it? They say 90% of the time. And they're both telling the truth. The problem is most managers say thank you in quite an offhand way. They just say, oh, thanks a lot for that, and they move on. Or they say, thanks for that. Anyway, how are you doing with the other tasks you've got? You're behind on them, aren't you? And that's meaningless. And what this technique, which I find really powerful, it's called ARF ? And it stands for action, results, feelings. And I'll come to the question mark in a second. So if you want to give praise that works, and I used to do this with one of my sons who used to love football but wasn't especially good at it. What I used to do was I used this ARF technique to really make him grow in confidence as a result of my thank you. This is how to say a thank you that works. So you have to say the action, the results that was achieved, and the feeling. So in an office environment, I might say, Chris, thank you very much for staying so late last night to finish off those slides. That's the action. As a result, at this morning's client presentation, they loved it, and I think we're going to win the business. Feeling. That makes me feel so proud to have someone like you on my team who is always prepared to go that extra mile. Thank you. Now that thank you, Matt, will be remembered.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And so that, and I'd encourage any of your listeners, just remember the ARF, action, results, feeling. And you can use that in private life. So with my son, what I would say, in a whole football match, he might have just done one good tackle, okay? But what I'd do is afterwards, I'd say, look, son, when you did that tackle, it was fantastic. Can you just show me what it is that you did? I say, wow, that's how you got the ball off him. That makes me feel so proud, son, that you did that after all the practice in the back garden. And it didn't make him much of a better footballer, but it did make him feel good. And one of the few things we know universally in education, both at school and in adults, if you enjoy learning and you feel confident about learning, you will learn and remember more. And that is, it's a critical part of the art and the science of learning. So say thank you to people. And that, especially in the corona world, where you've got many people working from home, where they might be working hard. And if you just do that ARF process, they will feel good, and that will sustain them when they're feeling lonely, isolated, disconnected from their normal colleagues. Thank you is such an underestimated process, but just saying thank you doesn't work.
Sure.
You've got to make it meaningful. Sorry, I was going on a bit there, Matt.
No, not at all, not at all. It's all very interesting, very, very beneficial stuff for everybody. I mean, and back on these on the turnaround companies as well. I mean, obviously, I know a lot of the problem for for many business owners, but by the time they've got a business that is let's say needing turnaround, is potentially one of two things, maybe more, but I think two things in particular. One is people. When you're in the situation of a failing business, you've probably never been in that situation before.
Exactly.
Therefore, you don't have the necessary skill set, the necessary tools for the job. And I think a second thing is a lot of the time, you can't see the wood for the trees. Just because you're in the moment and you can't step back to be impartial and emotionless and take that helicopter.
And also, as you said, man, if sorry to interrupt, but if you haven't been there before, you don't know which is the wood and which is the trees.
Very true.
It's all a blur.
So, I mean, I guess I'm kind of trying to frame the question here to ask you, if when you walk into these businesses, if there is top 3, top 5, whatever, let's say, immediate things that are normally always implementable, that you always see. I guess what I'm trying to get from this is, let's say for business owners at home right now who have got a struggling business, who are honest enough to admit it and accept it, and are willing to learn this, to learn the right skill set, from listening to a podcast like this, for example, or going away to go and skill up, who may not be in the position to afford or justify external consultants and external operators. What immediate things do you see as problems that tend to occur in most failing businesses, and what are your solutions for that?
Sure. Well, one of the books that I've written is called Houston, We May Have a Problem. It's all about turnaround. And in there, I say the 3 top things you need to do, exactly as you said, Matt. You got the top one straight away. You've got to accept it is a crisis, because in a crisis, you have to act differently for several different reasons. You don't have time to make mistakes. You've got to get it right. But also, you can't tolerate anyone else in your team saying, well, maybe it isn't that bad. Maybe it'll get better on its own. Now, it might not be that bad. It might get better on its own, but you've got to have a plan that will get you through if it doesn't. So you cannot tolerate anyone questioning whether it's a crisis. You've got to say, You've got to say, this is a crisis and we're going to act accordingly. The second thing is you have to protect cash. I guess most of your viewers will know that, will know the phrase, sales is vanity, profit is sanity. What they may not know is cash is reality.
Yeah.
And you can be as profitable as you want. If you go bankrupt, if you run out of cash, you're bankrupt and it's game over. And incidentally, especially for any of your viewers who are running relatively small businesses, you do need to understand the legality of insolvent trading. One thing that I would encourage everyone to do at the moment is to calculate their daily cash break even. Hopefully, everyone knows what their monthly profit break even is. And in some companies, a daily profit break even isn't that insightful, but a daily cash break even is, and you should have a forecast, even just a simple spreadsheet as to what your projected daily cash break even is. And then you need to monitor that like a hawk. You need to become obsessed with cash during this process, during this crisis, and just make sure every single day you know whether you're above, on, or below that daily cash break even. Because I know this is obvious, but let me say it anyway. If you are below today's daily cash break even, you're running out of cash. And everyone needs to be focused on cash collection. You will have all sorts of reasons and excuses and the like from customers who aren't paying, saying, "Oh, can we just pay you a bit late? And unless you accept a late payment, then we're going to stop using you as a supplier." The more someone argues like that, probably the more cash crisis they are in, and there's more chance that they will become a bad debt. So I would encourage everyone to be chasing cash as soon as it's due, and don't give in simply because there's a sob story. You have to be collecting cash. It's as simple as that.
And tell me, do you think there's one? Do you think there's one or two maybe tips or rules that business owners can use to see whether or not their business is even viable for the long term? How can someone really get to the truth, the nuts and bolts of the fact that are they just suffering a bad time right now, and is this a correctable problem, or are there fundamental flaws in that business model that is ever going to make it right?
Well, one of the questions I always ask, and I'll give you a subtlety of this in a second, is what is at the heart of your business's success? I actually did some work with Sir John Harvey Jones, who isn't so well known nowadays, but he was voted
when I was
the
at
captain.
School. I remember when I was at school, I'll have been about 10, and we used to sit in class, and the old Betamaxes had come out to watch recorded versions of Harvey Jones Troubleshooter.
Oh, fantastic series, fantastic series. One of the things I think he's famous for, and he certainly taught me, is that any business plan, any investment, doesn't matter how many millions of pounds it is, hundreds of millions of pounds, it should be able to be summarized on one sheet of paper. And what he used to do is if someone came to him and said, "We've got this great business, here's a report, will you read it?" He'd say, "No, I'm not going to read it. I will read one sheet of paper." And they'd say, but it's far too complex than that. You need to understand all of the subtleties of the chemical, because he used to run ICI, Imperial Chemical Industries. You need to understand the chemical reactions. He says, for a starter, just give me one summary, because until you can summarize it in one page, you haven't thought it through enough. Incidentally, the other thing he taught me, which I love, and I use this regularly, especially in a turnaround situation, if I ask someone to come in, I say, "Look, we've got this idea. How can we make this work?" And they come back and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Peter, it just can't, we can't do this." What Sir John Harvey Jones used to say, and what I say now, is, "Okay, that's interesting. Why don't you go away, come back tomorrow and tell me how it can be done?" And you know what? Almost every time with that challenge, they do come back with how it can be done. And so I think with that, you've got to summarize what you do. What is at the heart of your future success? And it's not what got you here, because what got you here won't get you there. on one sheet of paper, summarize what is at the heart of your future success. If you were to give that to your competitors, would they think, that's a load of tosh? Would they think, oh my goodness me, that is a scary proposition? If you took that sheet of paper to an investor, would an investor say, wow, I want to invest in this? And until you've got that sheet of paper in that way, you will not know whether you've got an exciting company of the future or not. So, and I would encourage anyone running a business now, just write down your most compelling argument for what's at the heart of your future success on that one sheet of paper. One other thing that I said, I use this phrase, what's at the heart of your future success, in a number of different ways. I'm often asked to go along and meet a CEO or a board of directors, and normally their PA will come down and find me at reception. And on the way up, so this is the PA of the CEO. Normally that's the person who comes to find me. I ask them two questions. What's uppermost in staff's mind at the moment? And they'll say something. Often it would be, well, at the moment they're concerned about the level of change and there isn't enough communication going on. They believe in the company, but they'd just like a bit more communication. I often hear that sort of thing. And then I ask the second question, tell me, what's at the heart of this organization's future success? And they'll say something, they'll have a stab at it. It's not couched in strategic Boston Consulting or McKinsey type language, but they'll have a go. I then get up into the boardroom, and after a bit of small talk, they'll say, okay, Peter, over to you. And I'll say, look, just before we start, could I ask you two questions? And can you please write down the answers with no conferring? So just imagine there's a CEO and maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 7 directors. And I say, tell me what's at the heart. Well, sorry, first of all, I say, tell me what's uppermost in staff's mind at the moment. And then I say, second question, what's at the heart of this organization's future success? So Matt, first of all, what do you think is the level of correlation of answer between the directors who've written down an answer to the first question? What's uppermost in staff's mind? How similar do you think the answers are?
I think they'll be all over the place.
Well, in a way they are. Often, though, it comes back to money. Right. What they say is our people want to earn more money. Okay. The second question, there is no correlation at all. The operations guy talks about at the heart of our future success is some really good kit that we're just investing in and some new systems. The marketing director will say, we've just hired a new brand agency. We've got this brilliant concept. We're going to go for TV advertising. That's at the heart of our future success. The finance guy will say, we manage our finances really carefully, and it's all about the return on investment thresholds that we use. The human resource director will probably say, well, it's all about culture and our people. Yeah. And what I then say, okay, so no common agreement there. And I'll say, how can you possibly call yourself a effective leadership team if you can't even agree the answer to the simple question? There's no trick involved. The simple question, what's at the heart of this organization's future success? Until you've got complete cohesion on that, you are doomed as a company. And then, this is the other question, I then ask them, if I was to ask a more junior member of your workforce those two same questions, what do you think they would say? And they say, well, they'd be concerned about money, and I don't know what they would say is at the heart of our future success. And I then say, well, actually, I have asked someone, and they didn't raise money at all. They said they're concerned about not fully understanding the strategic direction and not having enough communication. But also, aren't you shocked that you have no idea what is really at the forefront of people's minds, of your employees? You should do as a leadership team. You should be connected to them. But when I asked you, what do you think employees said about the strategic direction? And you said you don't know. Well, whose job is it to create the strategic direction and to communicate it. And what I then do is I take them through a simple scoring process to assess how ready are they for the success that they want to achieve. And you know what? Many CEOs and their leadership teams, when they're really being brutally honest, they score themselves about 10%. That's 10 out of 100 is what they score themselves as their readiness for the success that they want to achieve. And at that point, what I say is, well, okay, let's assume that is you've done it. There's no trick involved again, Matt. Let's assume that the way you're rating yourself is true. The good news is, whatever level of success you're already having, you're having with only 10% being ready for the future success. What would happen if that was 20% or 30% or 40%? And they go, wow, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be great if all of us agreed what was at the heart of our future success, and we were communicating that to all of our people, and we were in touch with our people with two-way communication? Just doing that, wouldn't that improve things? And then there are some other techniques that I always use whenever I help a company suddenly perform a lot better. And very quickly, what I found is almost any company can get from their initial score to 3 times that score in as little as 3 months. And I know many large organizations say it takes 2-3 years to change the culture. My view to that is, if you believe it, it will. Whereas if you just say, and one benefit of Corona is, the Nightingale hospitals were built in 10 days. Yeah. When you really set your mind to it, if you're serious and there's and you have clarity of consequence of what happens if you don't get it right, it's amazing what you can achieve. So as a turnaround guy, what I do, I'm used to going in, giving the inspiring vision of the future of what the company could be like, and then finding the path to achieve that goal. And that's why all of my companies are called Pathfinder, because what I do is I help people see the future they want, either as a person, as a CEO, or as a company, and I help them find their path to that future. And I think that's a great thing for leaders to do. So I'd encourage all of your viewers just to reflect on those 2 questions. What is your leadership team agreed? What is at the heart of your future success? And have you communicated that to staff in a meaningful way? And secondly, you need to know what is uppermost in your staff's mind. And if you think it's as simple as money, they want a salary increase, you're fooling yourself. The number one reason why millennials resign at the moment is because they're not getting enough skills development. And it's one of that lovely phrase about, you don't have to train your people. It's just that if you don't, they'll leave and they'll go to join a company that does train them. Skills are so important for everyone nowadays, and that's for CEOs as well. No offense to that, but however bright you are, whatever skills you've had, in 5 years' time, you have to have other skills, or you won't be effective.
I talk about this every day. The fact that people walk out of school or walk into a job or whatever it may be, and as far as they're concerned, they think that's the end of their education, and that they don't think they need to learn anymore. They don't think they can learn anymore. Even more worryingly, they don't want to learn anymore. So yeah, I am completely with you. But Peter, it's been fantastic having you here. I mean, the nuggets of gold you've shared in an hour have been fantastic, and I'm sure.
An hour.
It's been an hour. Yeah. For nearly an hour.
I can only apologise, Matt.
No. We're gonna have to get you back on again for round 2. But a minute ago you talked about Pathfinder. So how can our viewers find a path to you? Give yourself a little shout out if they want to hear more, if they want to come and find you, get in touch with you, take your advice. Where can we find you?
Sure. Well, that's very kind of you, Matt. Thank you. There are 2 different things that I do. One is I work with CEOs and the leadership teams. The website for that is Ryding.com. Ryding is with a Y. So peterryding.com. I regularly run webinars every Thursday at 11:30 for CEOs, and I run them for other CXOs as well other times. I am a coach and mentor to CEOs. I run strategy workshops, At the moment, I'm working with many companies whose plan A is in shreds, and they want to work for plan B, because the first companies out of their starting blocks after Corona will be the winners. And I'd encourage anyone to do that. So if you want to get in touch with me, simply go to peterryding.com. My email, by the way, is peter@peterryding.com. The other thing is I founded this thing called Vic, your virtual interactive coach. I was so impressed with coaching when I was coached 20 years ago. I believe it's the most powerful intervention the world has ever created in business. The problem is it's very expensive. And therefore, what we've done is we're using artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've taken the human coach out of coaching. And what's left is a virtual 24/7 coach in your pocket. It's as if you've got me 24/7. Everything I've ever learned, the most powerful coaching intervention where you can talk into any device and you get advice back. Really, really cool stuff that no other system has ever done before. And that is at vicyourcoach.com. Currently, because of Corona, we are on a mission to help 20 million people across 20 countries achieve and celebrate more success with less stress. And to do that, we're giving Vic away to anyone who wants it. All you do is go to vicyourcoach.com, and there's a little button for free Vic, and you can then get access to Vic, and hopefully that'll help you through. There's a lot of information in there, for example, how to work at home and how to manage your people when they're working at home. It helps with leadership skills, sales, self-limiting beliefs, dealing with conflict, team building, management. Incidentally, sorry, Matt, one of the things I'm a great believer in is most middle managers in the UK are rubbish at managing people. Many of them have never been trained, and some people get to the level of CEO without really knowing how to manage people. That is the biggest single lever any leader has got. If you can inspire your people. So a Vic is packed out with information on how to be a better manager, how to build rapport, how to inspire people. So peterryding.com if you want me to help you in your business, or vicyourcoach.com if you want to give Vic this online coaching system to all of your employees.
Fantastic. Well, that's great, Peter. Thanks a lot for being here again, buddy. I'm sure everyone at home is going to be having a look at downloading that. I know I certainly am. Loved your advice. Loved your view on things, and we're definitely going to have to get back together to talk again soon.
I look forward to it, Matt. Thank you.
Cheers, Peter. Bye bye.